Hi, and welcome to an introduction to the 9 literary elements. This year we're going to be spending some time learning about the 9 literary elements that make up fictional work. And this is the first video. It's an introductory video to the literary elements. At the beginning of this, I want you to think of literary elements as must-haves of a fictional story. So, these would be considered kind of like the required ingredients of a recipe. Think of it like this way. You wouldn't make a mushroom soup without any mushrooms. Then it wouldn't be a mushroom soup. So, think of these 9 literary elements as required. They are required in order for you to have a fictional piece of work. And there are 9 of them. So we are going to be introduced to these 9 literary elements. What I'd like for you to do is this. You have your workbook that I've given you, and it has the definitions in the workbook. You are going to watch this video. It's going to introduce you to the definitions of each of those 9 literary elements. And some of them you've probably heard of before, others you're probably encountering in a more high school type way. Middle school's probably taught you about conflicts, maybe taught you about problems of a protagonist, but at the high school level we need to start getting deeper into how these elements work to create a work of fiction. So what I'd like for you to do is watch the video. At the end of each of the definitions being written out, go ahead and pause the video and record your definitions into your workbook. At the end of the 9 definitions, and you having written in, I'm going to ask you to watch a video. Click over to YouTube and you're going to watch a video called Big Buck Bunny, and I'll provide a link for you in the module. And in that video, I'm going to have you study your definitions initially, just kind of loosely. Then I'm going to have you watch the video and see if you can't apply the 9 literary elements to the video. Remembering again that these are only this is only an introduction to the 9 literary elements. So let's take some time and be introduced to them. The first is the protagonist. Now, many of you know this. This is the main character of your story. So go ahead and pause the video and write in the definition, the main character for protagonist. Alright, the next literary element is the antagonist. Now, these are the forces that work against the protagonist, such as nature and other characters, setting, inner thoughts of characters. Those can all be antagonists. Notice here that we're going beyond just the idea of an antagonist and a protagonist in conflict with one another. Antagonistic forces can be things like other characters, that's true, but also the settings and inner thoughts of characters. Those can all be antagonistic forces. Alright, so go ahead and pause the video and write in this definition. Now we're going to be working with this one a little bit later on, so pay special attention to it as you're writing it in. Alright, the next literary element is setting. And the setting is simply the where and when the story takes place. Go ahead and pause the video and write in this definition. The next literary element we're going to discuss is plot. So plot is what happens to the protagonist, and that really does make up the plot. So those events that I have you record in your exit slips after each reading, those would be considered the plot, and those that deal with the protagonist. So go ahead and pause the video. Make sure that you should have paused it a second ago. But make sure you pause the video, go back if you need to. Let me see if I can bring it up. Yep, right there. Go ahead and pause the video if necessary. and make sure that you have plot definition written into your workbook. Alright, so our next literary element is conflicts. These are tensions between characters, or between characters in the setting, or characters in their inner thoughts. So this really comes down to that classic definition of a work of fiction where we see man versus man versus himself, or man versus the setting. Man versus nature, excuse me. So go ahead and pause this video now and write in this definition. Now, as you can see, the conflicts sometimes are between characters, sometimes between character and setting, and sometimes their own inner thoughts. Pay attention to this definition too. This is a little bit more complicated than you're used to from, say, your middle school days or maybe early high school. Alright, our next definition is problems. And this one's a little tricky. I find a lot of students really struggle with the concept of problems. And here it says the challenges that the protagonist faces as he or she attempts to resolve a conflict. Notice that the protagonist takes on the problems. We're going to study this a lot this year. The whole intricacies between conflicts and problems. But for now, go ahead and pause the video and make sure that you've written in the definition. Alright, our next literary element is climax. And this is the high point of the story, where all the action takes place, or all of the, it's over, happens. Alright, go ahead and pause your video and make sure that this definition makes it into your workbook. Alright, the resolution is next to the last actually, and these are the outcomes of the conflict. So what happened when the conflict's resolved? Or is it resolved? Some stories don't end with a conflict being resolved. Go ahead and pause that. Whoops, let me back that up. Go ahead and pause on this definition and make sure that you have it in your notebook. Alright, the last literary element of the 9, denouement. Alright, so this is a return to normal for the story that occurs after the climax. So this is kind of we refer to this one as the falling action. It's a return to normal for the story. Alright, so there we have it. There are the 9 literary elements that we are going to study this year. You have to think of these as the must-haves. You have to just understand them in order to read, write, and to really seriously better comprehend works of fiction for those aha moments to take hold. Okay? So what I'd like for you to do now is this. I'd like for you to pause this video. I'd like for you to take a look at your definitions and just kind of reread through them. And what you're going to do is, when you feel prepared, the very next page in your workbook should have all of the definitions with blank spots next to them that says examples from the video, Big Buck Bunny. And I'm going to have you watch the video Big Buck Bunny, and I'm going to see if you can identify at least some of these literary elements. Now again, this is introductory, so please do your best, knowing that you're just starting to work with some of these more complex literary elements. For example, I know that they don't teach problem at the middle school, so the problems for the protagonist in trying to solve a conflict, that can be a little tricky, especially in this video, Big Buck Bunny. What I'd like for you to do is, after you get done watching the video and recording the examples that you found for each of the literary elements, I want you to come to my desk, and we're going to have a discussion. And I'm going to hear what your thinking is and how you've kind of identified each of these literary elements. All right, I'll see you in a little bit.